for the first time. I used to have a Mac desktop just for video editing literally 20 years ago. And I struggle so hard to use PC most of the time and Mac occasionally. But then I went to Mac again just now. It is insanely fast and effective and works incredibly well. I just can't even get over, like, I use DaVinci Resolve 17, which is a free video editor, but it's on par quality wise with like Premiere and Final Cut Pro and any professional platform. But I'm sharing the YouTube. So we are live on YouTube, just so you know.
What's the struggle? Like, what, I mean, I don't understand how you can have that high quality of a video editing software and not charge for it.
Interesting. That would be something good for us to discuss, because I think that's where, the freemium model, that's where I think we're lacking in physical therapy also. Like, we can offer a base level service for free, because anyone who's been treating patients for any length of time can absolutely leverage their knowledge and understanding to provide what the patient needs most of the time for free, because that then becomes the lead generation for the premium level service. And even for this software, DaVinci Resolve, I think it's only like $350 to upgrade to the premium level. But it is just phenomenal. So, okay. So we are live. I have the YouTube feed showing up here. Let me share it with you. This way you can check out the channel also. And then potentially, if anybody jumps on our Zoom conversation, they are welcome to ask questions.
That's fascinating to me that it shows live on YouTube up in the, that's a neat integration.
Yeah. I've had this is the $15 a month Zoom for like 2.5 years. And it was just more recently that they started offering this as part of it. And then we could do Facebook Live also, but Facebook doesn't pay me to broadcast, so I don't support that.
Oh, look at you getting bougie as a streamer.
That's right. I told my kids, I'm like, we need a YouTuber, my like dad YouTuber t-shirt. And then I'm going to wear it the next time I go to their games.
That's funny.
All right. So let's just start. For anybody jumping on the live stream, if anybody comes along, I'm sure you all know who Will Butler is. But Will, if you would do me the honor and just let anybody who doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I want people to understand that you are a physical therapist and you're moving to the financial world. Like, just give me 3 minutes of that.
Yeah, I could probably even cut it down even shorter than that, right? Elevator pitch is brief.
Sure.
Yeah. So my name is Will. I went to physical therapy school, caught the advocacy bug during our advocacy lunch meetings, wanted to help the profession, didn't resonate with what was being suggested because I had no clue what it meant to be a physical therapist. So it was hard for me to go beg for money from politicians under like an obvious ignorance and knowledge deficit. But that candle still kind of burned and it flickered a little bit. And I got into clinical practice and started to notice, I guess I would say, symptoms of overstress professionally. And when I examined that, started to realize that most of them had some form of a financial correlation, whether it was student loans related, benefits related, just the way that the profession and how I was supposed to progress in it would work, all those types of things. And I started to notice that those thoughts popped up most commonly in the least appropriate time and place, which was patient interviews, right? Mrs. Smith, telling me that she can't hold her grandchildren. And here I am nodding, playing the role, doing a little bit of acting as a physical therapist while I worried about my student loan payment clearing, asking myself, how do I get out of the rat race? And conversation with a good friend by the name of Jeff brought to my attention that I'm not unique. I'm as unique as I thought as unique as they felt, they were as common. And so he challenged me to learn a bit and then pick up licensure. So I was held accountable to the advice I was giving and enter the financial services world. And so I've been here for a while. Early on, I spent a lot of time talking with fresh professionals all throughout healthcare, helping them navigate student loans and make better decisions. And there's been a transition and a bridging process in which my preferred my preferred person to work with, my ideal patient, would be a healthcare entrepreneur. And the reasons for that is that my dad had been a business owner, passed away unexpectedly. That's when you have to put into action plans that you've made. And turns out that my family didn't have a good financial plan for when bad things happen, and that only made bad things worse. And so, having conversations with the healthcare business owner feels like I'm passing along prudent advice to the closest personification of my late father, which would be the business owner.
Wow. So what are you doing? You were going to a lot of universities. You were providing little lectures and stuff and traveling around doing that. You've been on some of the circuits, like within the professional world. What are you seeing now? Let's say like the last 3 months. Obviously, COVID came through, lots of change, lots of adjustments. You said healthcare entrepreneur. How are you seeing businesses pivot? How are you seeing providers like me and others pivot? Like, what's on the horizon?
Yeah, so I'll backtrack just a little bit even before getting into that answer part of it. I still do the presentations to the universities because I feel like the time value exchange is still worthwhile for all parties. And I just enjoy the performative side of things. I think if I reverse engineered my entire life, I'd probably end up in the entertainment industry in some capacity. And so the song and dance of presenting financially pertinent information to budding fresh professionals is still worth my time. And, as a matter of fact, I think I have half a dozen of those presentations coming up in the next month or so. So,
What kind of stuff do you cover in those presentations for students?
it all depends on the amount of time and the platform that I'm being offered by the universities. Some of them try to squeeze me in like a lecture for an hour, and so you end up getting a condensed message. Some of them offer open architecture and let me talk for a few hours. And so the topics is the same. Most prominently, people want to understand their loans better and understand them in layman's terms. Sure, it would help to understand them like financially as they're written, but like how often working with a patient, like they want to know everything we know, but they don't have the time or the bandwidth to synthesize it and then properly apply it. So I spent a lot of the time talking about practical aspects of student loans, the importance of professional introspection and kind of understanding and charting a course so that you can be more confident and a stronger negotiator when you get into clinical practice. There's typically an element of discussing autonomy and that it means you can quit a job that sucks and do something different. I think that's important to know. We talk about boring home ec related stuff, home economics related stuff is like benefits and what do they mean and how do you practically apply them. And then if time permits, we'll walk through a case study of basic application of basic financial principles. That I would say largely that covers what's discussed.
Nice. And then we were talking about what's changing on the horizon, what you're seeing in the landscape of healthcare entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think for the entrepreneurs that are pivoting out of physical therapy or adapting and monetizing hobbies, non-PT hobbies or pursuits, it's a little bit different because that's kind of always been going on. I think there's a little bit more fever, fervor, or whatever F word I'm thinking of present, but they around these types of things, and I think a lot of it's twofold. First, they thought they had more stability than they actually did, and COVID exposed that. And then some of them just had more time to actually think practically about what they enjoy doing. And so in those people, I would say that I just see more people uh, doubling down in those types of efforts and accepting that their clinical skill is at what they perceive would be an adequate level to, work with patients and stay productive in the field. As far as brick and mortar, it just varies so much depending on states and reimbursement models and those types of things. What I would say that I absolutely saw is that business owners who thought in advance and who typically planned conservatively prior to COVID seemed to fare the best through the pandemic. And I saw those who were kind of run and gun and open and buy all the flashy equipment and do all the things all the time seem to have spread themselves a bit financially too thin. And some of them have been bought up, sold up by various groups, PT and non-PT. So you've seen that. I've seen the obvious strong pivot to telehealth where it's possible, and people are learning. It's just like learning anything new. There's successes, there's failures, there's discouragement, there's excitement, and so we're seeing that being adapted. And then, but again, going back to those, I'm seeing talked to plenty of PT business owners, brick and mortar, who actually had their best year ever last year because they're able to leverage, federal government assistance. They were able to open when their competition couldn't. Um, and they were able, like, I've really seen more of a polarizing of what was probably already existing.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard it and I know this is what we did. And I imagine you're going to say that this is what you saw also. I know that, like any major life event, any major change to the economy, it forces businesses to consolidate, to become more efficient, and to cut the fat, And so for us, where back in 2008, we did it midway between then and now, and we did it again. I was supporting stuff within my business that really wasn't making me a profit. It was probably losing me money. It wasn't adding any benefit to the patient experience, the patient outcome. It's just what we always did. And so when all of a sudden we shut down for March and April, that forced me to be less comfortable, and I was too comfortable before. Now I had to make the hard decisions. Now I had to cut back. I had to make pairing decisions. And like you said, we run more profitably now than we have in probably the last 5 years. We're not seeing the volume. It's not like I'm more profitable because I tripled my caseload. I see fewer patients collectively across the business. We're more profitable collectively across the business. And I've been able to pare down what we were just wasting money on before. Is that what you're seeing in other businesses, other practice settings?
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing that where when the owners are being forced to look at their books and to see what matters and what doesn't. Again, I think that's why the conservative, mindful, almost somebody would say old school in a way type of business practice and principles. So I saw a lot of them, do well is because they went back to that principle, of where can we tighten up. And I think that's good. I think things have been so good for so long that some people weren't proactively looking at way they were doing things. And so again, Corona has exposed their weaknesses. So I also think, even though the calendar flipped and there's a new digit behind the last two, I mean, it's still relatively the same environment. Certain elements have changed, and I have a feeling that um, some of the symptoms of a year of altered practice, I think, are going to still manifest. I don't know exactly how, but we'll see.
Have you been following? Because I have not followed the ATI going public.
Yeah, that's interesting. I Corporate physical therapy is a struggle for me because physical therapy by nature has a lot of heart. It's a lot of emotional. It's a lot of feelings. It's in the name therapy, right? And so to see so many of those people be heart forward types of people end up on this ship being led by big business, it can be a little bit disheartening. I haven't followed up on the specifics of it because there's there's no opinion that I could share or action I could take or really a desire that I have that would kind of shift and alter those courses. So I just kind of have listened to the opinions of people who I know who are impassioned by this type of thing. And so uh, it's about the
This
extent.
is something's been in the making for 20 plus years, right? Like I can remember 20 years ago, clinics would consolidate. You'd open 10, 15 clinics, you'd get over 5 million in revenue, you'd sell to a medium sized entity, and then they would package year 20 with 100 other clinics and sell to a bigger private equity group. It's just, it's the first one that I've heard of going public in that time. I guess they finally got big enough that they could do it. But I can't imagine like Athletico and Dreyer and some of the other big names that are out there that aren't public aren't going that route also.
Yeah.
Now, I've always been a big believer, and I've always kind of espoused the idea that we need corporate therapy. We need those big providers. We need those big suppliers. Not everybody is going to want or buy the premium level service, and while none of us individually could handle the volume an ATI, an Athletico, a NovaCare can handle, we need those providers in the market to soak up the majority of the people who need these services. And so that then opens up the ends of the spectrum, the extremes, the 5% highest level premium service and the 5%, lowest level, most economic service, to huge opportunities. And that's where I see the blue ocean for anybody listening to this, is to say, okay, I'm not going to mess with the middle under the bell curve. I'm going to leave that to the big guys who have public funding and boatloads of money. But I'm going to focus on the patient who, has worked their entire life. They're in their early 60s. I'm thinking of a specific individual right now in my head that travels back and forth to Florida, back to Ohio. He has plenty of disposable income. He loves traveling with his family. He's finding that he's not able to keep up on the family vacation. It would be nothing for him to spend $25,000 on a 1 week family vacation because he's got the money to do it. And the time with his family is more important than anything. But once he gets to the point where physically he cannot do it, then to invest $10,000 in a 4 week plan of care with me to allow him to continue to do those family vacations for the next 10, 15 years, totally worth it. That's something that the big corporates are never going to be able to do. But that's something that the people listening to this absolutely should spend time looking at doing, what are your thoughts about some of that?
I think there's the challenge and push I have with those corporate conglomerates is that you were talking about trimming fat earlier.
Yeah.
That's what they do, but they trim the wrong end, right? You need some of the fat in the meat to flavor it. And so I think sometimes they cut the wrong chunks of fat, they cut the wrong silver tissues. And so the biggest issue that I have with corporate physical therapy is what they care about. And I'll say all. I'll even go so far as to say absolute, even though I know that I'm inherently wrong to a degree in that statement, but just polarizing is that they what they should be caring about is the provider, because a better, happier, healthier provider um, produces better and does better and stays longer and all those types of things. And their models exist and subsist on taking advantage of, a lot of fresh new clinicians. They bring them in. They know that the greatest power they have is the ability and the licensure to evaluate. They don't really care about the rest of it. So they dehumanize the wrong parts of the physical therapy process. That's my big issue with giant corporate physical therapy is because the decisions that steer that ship take place so far away from the deliverable that they have no skin in that game. And I think that that makes it very difficult for physical therapists to find their place, and that's where you see these symptoms of these burnouts. And then furthermore, it makes it more difficult when they're, again, trimming the wrong fat for those physical therapists to develop the right kind of skill sets, so that then they can eventually move into delivering a more premium service. It's really hard to evolve when you don't have time to look up from the machine. And
Sure.
so that's my big issue with corporate physical therapy. And one of the reasons that that happens is because physical therapists by nature are not good business owners. That's not part of their makeup. And so you have a few people who do, and they're gathering things up. And at the end of the day, people are selfish. And it is in that owner's interest to be able to exit the practice, in some sort of a large deal, if it pushes him and secures their family and does those types of things. But it is conflicting because it does bastardize even the minimal level of care standard could improve so much within the profession if we weren't under that type of a gun. Again, I don't know how you absolutely solve that. I don't know those types of things, and it's not me being anti-capitalist, because capitalism solves a lot of problems and forces a lot of innovations. But I mean, a big engine in the wrong car with the wrong driver causes problems. And that's kind of the issue that I have there. Now, as far as like offering the premium services, anything in the entire world that you want to get into has, an economical model and a standpoint. I was thinking about this today in regards to like shoes. I was listening to a podcast about a young 20 something who became a bootmaker. I think that's his actual name on Instagram. I think it's the bootmaker. And he was artistic. He always liked to be creative. Ended up in this craftsman's trade, and he had said that he had started basically remodeling shoes or reupholster. I don't know the proper term. And then got to a point where he's like, I suck at it. Never even sold a shoe. Still had the desire to be with them. Stumbled upon somebody who's a bootmaker. The guy took him in as an apprentice, and now he's 20 something years old, owns the building that his business is in, and what he does is crafts and resoles boots. I mean, he's an exceptional craftsman. And so the reason I bring that up is not everybody needs a pair of boots crafted with Horween leather by, a one-off craftsman out of Los Angeles, to the tune of, he has none of his prices listed anywhere, which tells you something about where they are.
Right.
And so what I don't even think some people would even understand it or appreciate it, even if they could. But there's a lot of space between Shaquille O'Neal's affordable economical shoe that's put shoes on the feet of millions and millions of children. When people snap back at him for having an economic, shoe, he says it's better that these kids have shoes on their feet and in reasonable, decent shoes than not. And so I think that's kind of the spectrum that physical therapy can operate on. And I think things get confounded, conflated, and whatever other con words we want to think of when they start to gray those lines and they fail to appreciate the different areas that those types of clients represent. And I notice that when I talk to these people bridging from typical clinical practice into something a little bit more custom. Maybe they're not that 4-figure boot, but maybe they're also not the $20 shoe, but trying to establish where they are. And it's that identity and that like patient, who are they trying to serve? So I don't know, but that's one of the reasons why I like the types of material that you put out specifically is you help people realize existing models that exist and something that they're familiar with, if they're willing to kind of step into unfamiliar territory, which is a lot of what Medicare is. But you've always told me in our conversations, and I've heard you say it publicly, that it's so consistent. Figure out a way to create these models around this in the quickest thing to a successful business, instead of constantly trying to reinvent the wheel, reinvent the wheel, reinvent the wheel. But anyway, that was a long rant. Not even sure where I meant to go or where from. It's just running.
That's why we do it, to bring those ideas out. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think it's so funny that you bring up the story about the shoemaker, the boot guy, because the more time I spend in this world where I'm kind of in this pseudo world of, I treat patients. I went in and I saw a caseload this morning. I did 2 evaluations, I did patient follow-ups, but I'm also in the world of, teaching therapists how to contract with Medicare and build their business from the ground up. The more time I spend in this world, the more I realize, as much as we like to think we're more scientists than artists, we're artists. Like, we act like artists, we treat our business like artists, we treat our craft like an artist does. And so many times I see business principles trying to be forced on the brain of an artist when we lose sight and we don't realize. I think most clinicians would absolutely take the choice of doing what they want to do, what they believe is best for the individual client. Client's the canvas, I'm the artist as a therapist, and lose money in the process, than actually have a successful, sustainable, profitable business. And I'm just as guilty of it. I mean, even though I have a profitable business, I sacrifice profit every single day. I make decisions that are anti-profit simply because I want to do what I want to do. I want to do what I believe is best. I'm doing this for me. And hopefully as a result, the patient gets a better outcome. But I think that too often we as newer entrepreneurs, small practice owners, budding businesses, we want to try apply all these business concepts, which are amazing concepts, but we don't take into account context. It's like your patient with pain. I've got a patient right now, I'm sharing a series on YouTube. He's given me permission. He had a total knee replacement approximately 7 to 8 weeks ago. He had a manipulation under anesthesia exactly 1 week ago. So I saw him 1 hour after the manipulation. I mean, I think his wife just packed him in the car and brought him to the clinic. And so it's just so fascinating, still 20 years in the business. He comes in and like, how you doing? How's everything feeling? He's telling me how much pain he's in. And he's describing it as knee pain. He's saying it's knee pain. But then once we start to do anything, he's pointing at the quad and like IT band, and he's pointing at the calf and all of these muscles and areas around the knee. None of it is actually knee pain, but absent of context, we lose sight of this. So I craft an experience for him, talking about theater and the experience, and that allows him to feel comfortable, allows him to bring the guard down, to turn the alarm off for just a little bit. We can joke and we can distract him, and we can do all of these things. And that's art. I come from a fine arts background. Like, I was a graphic designer, fine artist. I come from a family who's full of musicians and theater. And it's just so much of what we do is more art than science. And we have to take that into account when we're thinking about building our business. And so that's what to me is so fascinating about you. You are such the artist in so many different ways that you're trying to bridge that gap between, okay, these clinicians think they're scientists, they're not, they're artists. And I'm going to bring the financial world to them, but I understand that I have to bring it to them as an artist, not as a business owner, not as, a scientist, not as an engineer. Like, an engineer brain is very different than many clinical therapist brains.
It's a science brain.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are you seeing as kind of some of the more successful avenues aside from the telehealth, or maybe a innovative way to introduce telehealth? But are you seeing any kind of newer innovative things that clinicians and therapists and practice owners are doing over the last couple months, half a year?
Yeah, I'll hop right back to that because I had some thoughts based upon
Yeah.
some of the things that you were saying. And that I think I do agree there's a lot of artistically minded people within the profession. I believe there's also a lot of science minded people in the profession. I think success requires critical thinking skill sets. And I've seen too many people. So I guess if this could be interpreted, depending on if people know you and I or whatever, as pushback on a little bit of that idea. I think some people turn to the art of therapy because they haven't taken as a way to explain or to try to, not a way to explain, as a way to entertain the person, the patient in front of them. Because the one thing that we do know, whether or not we choose to accept it, is largely the body heals itself and that we're here to help direct the healing. And I think one of the problems that I've observed is that we're not very good at critical appraisal of the necessary scientific elements to see healing, because it is a balance. I mean, if it was all art, um I don't think we'd get reimbursement from insurances in that regard. um I would need to talk to somebody from an insurance company. That's a whole different can of worms, and I really don't think for the live chat that makes a whole lot of sense.
Sure.
But I see too many people not getting the kinds of elements and the outcomes that they want to get. And I say this because I see these same people. I see them. That's the beauty of kind of the position where I sit now, maybe with more time than I should on my hands, is I see people's marketing efforts and the messaging that they're putting out to attract patients. And then I see that same person complaining in various forums that they're not getting certain results and certain outcomes from a patient client care perspective. And those same people are then sharing successes and failure on the business side of things. And I think that there's too much delineation. And there's not enough critical reasoning in some of these things. And it actually makes me sad in some instances where people rely on more of their hope in the art than properly applied science. And I guess I would say properly applied science, even down to things like what Jerry Durham talks a lot about, the patient experience and that sorts of stuff. It's just, I just feel like so many people in physical therapy practicing as professionals are just always spinning their gears. They just don't feel at home and they don't feel it there. And it's hard to watch. And those who are successful that I'm seeing successfully navigate, the most successful ones I'm seeing, either have spent years in a specific niche and they've figured out a way to step outside their geographic bounds. So maybe they're moving online, or the people who are applying tried and true business principles, and they're either naturally business minded, like in that, or they've trained their mind to become that way, and they're just executing on those types of things. They're saying, this is my deliverable, it's been tried and tested, I can do it. What do I need to build around that principally to like generate and create a business? As far as unique things, I'm not necessarily seeing anything absolutely unique. I'm seeing those who really are who are more of the artistic are moving away from traditional model and getting away from it because for whatever reason they're not thriving the way that they would like to. And then those who are applying tried and true business principles and just accepting, this is how things are today, this is what I can do to get the most out of it, and then applying it. I don't know if that kind of helped at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've got about 10 minutes before everything breaks loose in my house because my kids will be home from school. Um, so what are some of, here are some of the common questions that I've been getting more recently, and I'd love to get your take on it. So a couple therapists reached out to me. They're looking at starting their business, a couple mobile, couple brick and mortar. I don't know if you saw it. I don't know. I'm sure you remember. Years ago, I did a review of U.S. Physical Therapy's financial report. I just did a new one last night and the night before. And right now, that's still private for the group members from my Medicare course. But what would you say to somebody who comes to you? They've been a practicing clinician. They're like, well, hey, here comes Damon. I want to get started, but I don't even know where to start. Like, how can I even think about the finances and the numbers and put some plan together?
Yeah, I think step one, um it's so much like a patient eval.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing. Step one, gather some data. Like, I want to start a business. Okay, what's your current state? Where are you currently? What are you doing? What, so practical ways, because people say that's just so nebulous. Well, the way that you would practically apply that is looking at your current cash flow. Uh, And the way that you would do that is listing out your budget, contrast it with what's coming into the house. All right, got it. What does savings look like? It's like looking at your component parts, because what that does is it basically helps you forecast the runway that you have to give the plane a chance to get lift and take off. I think that that's important. Too many people are trying to pivot hard into unique business models as a saving grace for their financial well-being, and it just creates too much pressure in the wrong areas. Normal business is stressful enough as it is getting started under the best of conditions, and you add in the external factors of like financial panic, and you just will fall apart at the seams. So
Yeah.
I think that's the first critical thing is like actually understand where you are, so then you can get an idea of, and then you can forecast expenses for your business. Like it's an order of operations. Too many people want to rush to their marketing plan because they think it's, I don't have patience in there, instead of testing the model and testing their process and testing their program. I don't know. Those are my initial thoughts.
Damon, if you want to ask a question, go ahead. If you just want to hang out and listen, that's great too. All right. Um,
I'm listening right now. I just want to soak in all the knowledge. Appreciate it.
all right, perfect. Will, do you have any advice for somebody who says, I've got a wife, I've got 2 children, I've been working as a therapist, and I want to go on my own? When do I pull the trigger? When do I go all in? When do I make the leap?
The when is, I'm not entirely sure. It depends, right? Isn't that the classic PT
That's right.
answer? I would say I would say, not that I think Gary Vaynerchuk is the end all be all, but I do remember vaguely, and I could be falsifying memory because it's been so long ago, so someone can claim it, is that like you work what pays the bills um, when that time is right, and then afterwards you hustle on the side project until the demand and the success of the side project is such that it replaces the main hustle. So it's that bridge. It's figuring out what that pivot point is on the bridge. So in the things that you can work on hustle, that's where your business plan comes in. It's where you can forecast, you can run your financial models. You can figure out, reverse engineer your salary and your income needs, and you can figure out what the minimally viable result is. And then if that feels, attainable, then you're positioning yourself to pull the trigger. I think one of the things that is of critical importance, and I have a bias to this because of, watching my dad pass away unexpectedly, is I think you need to audit your financial insurances. And you need to audit them not because odds are you disappear and you vaporize or whatever, but the reality is that the cost of your income not coming in or your presence in the family is economically so devastating that it's not worth the risk. And so those types of things are basic insurances, life insurances, disability insurances. And as a new solopreneur or as a business owner, you're not a good financial risk for those companies. So doing that before you make the leap, getting whatever you can in place and in order before you jump ship, in air quotes. I think those are things that you can do to increase like just practical success of your family, because that's what you had mentioned. That was the case that was there. It's
Yeah.
I just, the when is so hard to say. I think there's so many things that can be done ahead of time before pulling the trigger to stack the odds in your favor of success.
Right. Let me ask you this, because you brought up something about this when I started sharing these posts. So I don't know, 2 weeks ago, maybe I shared posts about creating a program that focuses on high net worth individuals who are looking to buy life insurance, to get them healthy, get them in shape, move them up the premium ladder to the highest level of preferred before they actually buy the policy, in an effort to save potentially thousands of dollars over the life of the policy. You're in that world. You're dealing with these individuals. You're dealing with people who deal with these individuals. And you could totally be like, It's totally a ridiculous idea. Nobody's ever going to do it. But what are your thoughts? Like Damon, where he is up in Michigan, what are your thoughts on a clinician who has a background in health, who has a background in strength and performance, and who legitimately believes, hey, I could take a person, we could drop 20 pounds, we can bring the blood pressure down, we can do this, we can improve the blood sugar levels, and then they can have their physical and get their 20-year policy or whatever it is that they're going to do. Like, is that a reality? And is that something that could be marketed to the agents and the brokers and the financial planners who are dealing with those individuals directly?
I think you would have a very hard time selling that model because for a few reasons. Actuarial data says and speaks a lot, and they take into a lot of factors, as well as some of the questions when you're underwriting people is they ask about large shifts in weight over a certain defined period of time. And so as well, it could be something that maybe they look into the medical record and they're like, 6 months ago, this person was 50 pounds heavier, 40 pounds heavier. And that still might not influence the rating because, again, we're operating on an incredible coach has maybe hundreds of data points. They'll say they've worked with thousands. You better have decades and decades of experience. I just don't think that it's practically demonstrated enough for it to be a successful model. And I don't think people who are brokering those policies, their counter arguments would be that what if something happens in that time period? Odds are not tremendous, but how am I going to face a family? The wife calls me up and says, hey, we've been working together. My husband died. We need to execute that life insurance policy. Well, Mrs. Smith, well, Mr. Smith. So, one of the things we planned on is we were going to delay that because, your significant other was firmly committed to changing lifestyle and was working with a coach. So they didn't get that done and there's nothing in force in place. It only takes 2 or 3 of those instances or singular instances to make that an absolute impossibility to the advisor.
Sure.
Because then there could be legal ramifications around that. So could that be a pitch? I think it could be. I think that could be a marketing pitch and a marketing ploy. Again, I just don't see where the art, the science, et cetera, has met well enough in the realm of physical therapy for that to be a guaranteed deliverable. Because one thing we do know is the fallibility of being humans. How many times have I looked in the mirror and said, Will, you're dropping 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds over the years, and it doesn't happen.
Right.
And I know better than most of the country how to do that. I like the idea. I think in a vacuum, I would love for that to happen. I don't see it as viable.
And there's never a point once the policy is established that they would go back and look at, 5 years later on a 20-year policy or a whole life policy or whatever, they would reassess the health status of the individual and change things for the better.
No, they have those types of things. They have reconsideration periods. So, for example, I recently worked with somebody who had recently undergone a surgery and were just not in the best of shape or health. And so the insurance company put a bookmark on a couple of things within the policy and said, hey, overall and based on your history, you seem like a smart risk for us. In the short term, we're going to limit coverage on these sorts of areas. In a year or 2 years, maybe in this instance, let's reconsider it and we'll observe medical records and we'll amend the policy accordingly. So like they are willing to do that. And I'm seeing life insurance companies in particular become a lot more mobile and open to different approaches like that. There's so much gray when you get into the financial insurance planning of types, ways, and it's not all created equal. And so people think that, you pay the lowest price and they want the custom one-off Horween leather lifetime boot that ends up getting written into your will, pass these on to my son because there's at least 50 years left on this soul. So I do like the idea though. And like the optimist in me and the idealist is like, oh, let's do it. This is great. But what I can say is my time in financial services, the difference in somebody being a few pounds healthier. Now, my sample size bias is I primarily work with healthcare providers, so they're generally more healthy.
Yeah.
that somebody shifting their weight one way or the other, or improving certain markers, it wouldn't, because like they might rate a policy based on blood pressure and say, hey, check back in a year or two, and if you're better, we'll drop that rating. Like I do see those kinds of things, but anyway.
Interesting. So that one's off my list.
Yeah, I in a vacuum it works, but you're gonna have a real hard time, especially because that model currently works, and it doesn't matter who you do it through. If somebody brokers an insurance, chances are they're getting paid for that policy going in force. So
Yeah.
best interest of the person to get the coverage,
Yeah.
and you're cutting off an income source to the advisor.
Right.
So it's I don't know. In the companies that say, who front that there's no fee or commission, the company itself is receiving that money.
Yeah.
It's just the person you're interacting with doesn't get that money. So it's
Gotcha.
a policy in force is better than a better policy never implemented.
Right. Awesome. All
Kind of like
right. Well, let's,
healthcare, right?
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. All right, let's wrap it up here. Stay on, don't hang up, Will. Guys, if you want to get a hold of Will for whatever reason, he is a wealth of knowledge. Will is part of my team. He is what helps me stay sane. And when I have ideas like this, he's the guy I go to bounce those ideas around because, like you saw just here, I mean, he's not going to tell me what I want to hear. He's going to tell me what he truly believes. So if you want to connect with him, find him on Facebook, reach out to him. You can schedule a little conversation. He's an incredible human. Otherwise, guys, I hope to do more of these live chats just for fun. I think it gets the creative juices flowing. And Will, like I said, don't hang up, but thank you for coming on and spending the time with me. I'm going to end the live stream and I'm going to talk to you in just a second.